Welcome to episode 45 of the Breaking Balls podcast. Ironically, it was 45 at the track this weekend out in California, but Kyle Busch and the 8 team out at RCR, they are red hot to start the year. Big win for the boys at the last race at Auto Club.
100%, Bob. The weather outside was frightful, but the win for Kyle Busch fans was delightful. And there was no practice on Saturday, so, Bob, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow in Fontucky. Let's go, Dolly.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
All right, Bob, big exhale here. We finished. It was an exciting day of racing. We packed a lot into it. We're still racing as we're recording here in the Xfinity series. But, Bob, a wonderful trip out to Fontucky per usual to the AAA Auto Club Speedway. Bob, let's not bury the lead. Congratulations, Kyle Busch, but what a day of racing.
Yeah, if this is the last weekend we're doing the 2 miles at Auto Club, it was a heck of a way to go out there. It was memorable. You got the snow. I mean, we're going to break down a lot here today. Obviously, the Kyle Busch win. An eventful weekend for a couple of different teams, obviously. Some manufacturer talk and like you said, we got a doubleheader on Sunday. Xfinity's still racing. We're wrapping up as that race is still wrapping up as well. But I kind of love this night race, kind of an appetizer with a dessert at the end. But a lot to break down here for sure.
Yeah, 100%, Bob. We will get you the winner of that Xfinity race when it comes in. But like I said, we didn't want to bury the lead too deep here. Congratulations to Kyle Busch. Obviously, tweeted this week, if it was 1998, this would have been back-to-back weeks for Kyle Busch. But the overtime rules, green, white, checkered, so-and-so. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. wins the Daytona 500. But oh, how fate would have it. Kyle Busch gets his chance and grabs victory this week, Bob. Just a heck of a performance from him and just a complete performance from RCR all around.
Yeah, you mentioned the RCR performance. Kyle Busch and that team, you have not seen any growing pains to start with. They have hit the ground running. And obviously that 8 team was very fast with Tyler Reddick last year. With Randall Burnett, the crew chief, he stayed on. He didn't follow Tyler to Toyota. And you're seeing that momentum continue from last year, except for, when Tyler Reddick had woes, it was at the end of the races when they'd lead, 50, 60 laps. Kyle Busch is keeping that speed, and he's finishing these races already for the first 3. You look at the Clash, already battled up, came all the way through the field there in the last main stage there. Nobody else was really able to pass. Kyle Busch went through the field. Daytona last week. If this is 1998, he wins the race, like he said multiple times. And this week at Auto Club at California Speedway, whatever you want to call it, however old you are, Kyle Busch comes in and had a speeding penalty in stage 1, back of the field, did it again, runs right through the field, passes everyone, and he was clearly one of probably 2 or 3 guys that had fast cars today that could continuously be at the top of the field. And I mean, at the end of the day, that man is won 19 straight years of winning in the Cup Series. I mean, that's an unprecedented stat right there.
Yeah, that breaks the record. I mean, previously it was 18 years in a row. He was tied going into the race, so with this race, obviously gets the 19th victory. Just another kind of straw in the hat that is Kyle Busch's well-decorated NASCAR legacy at this point. I mean, it's incredible. It's just one of these things. What hasn't the guy won? But, I mean, Bob, you touched on it. The 8 car was really fast last year here, and obviously it was just, I think, a blown tire at the end there that kind of ended up, gifting Kyle Larson the win towards the end. But, I mean, I think you're seeing out of Kyle Busch and RCR, it's just a good melding of 2 incredibly talented racing teams and a team and a driver. Because for so long, obviously, with being at JGR, Kyle Busch has a lot of insight and wisdom into how to win races. I mean, the results speak for themselves, but last year, RCR's engines, I mean, there wasn't a race that Tyler Reddick wasn't in last year. So I think you're seeing, the combination of the 2 coming together, kind of taking the best of what Kyle Busch knows and the best of what's over there at RCR. And these results early on, I mean, even Austin Dillon comes in, I believe, with a top 10 finish today, if that holds right in my mind. But just really a great day for RCR, and it really does seem like it's going to be a pretty consistent sign of things to come, Bob.
Consistency is the biggest thing there, Ad. You saw Kyle Busch last year lack the consistency, and he's lacked it the last 2 or 3 years in the 18 car at Joe Gibbs. Whether that's the contract talk, especially last year, whatnot. Obviously, owning the team.
I mean, on top of it, Bob, I mean, it's not even, it wasn't just Kyle Busch who had inconsistency at JGR last year. I mean, think of the amount of times Martin Truex Jr. was in position to win races last year, and some of the Toyotas just ended up failing on him. And we'll get into them a little bit later, but it was just one of those things that came to my mind that, some of these Toyotas may be having a little bit of a mechanical issue. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead, Bob. I apologize for cutting it.
No, not at all. It's very interesting to see. You get Kyle Busch, like you said, with RCR. That team has had success the last year or two with Tyler Reddick being very competitive. The RCR engines have been red hot to start the next gen era, if you will. And to top that off, you get a Hall of Fame driver, a 2-time champion, now the oldest tenured driver in the garage besides Kevin Harvick and Truex and all these guys. I mean, you get a guy who's pissed off for greatness, wants to prove that he is still that guy who's had some down seasons, if you will, the last few years. This is a recipe for just complete success when you look at it just from an overall picture. And to have the start they've had just really laminates that potential for what they can build to down the line. There's no reason to think Kyle Busch shouldn't be a contender for the Final Four this year with the start. Obviously, it's 2 races in, 3 if you count the Clash, but there's no reason to think that the momentum from last year's team is not going to carry over. And you mentioned RCR as a whole. Austin Dillon finished 9th, had a great car at the Clash, had a great car at Daytona as well. Maybe the culture's starting to shift. RCR's kind of coming back into that forefront. Maybe the energy has kind of been renewed in that garage.
And not to mention, Bob, we're headed to Las Vegas, and that's Kyle Busch's home race. I mean, this just seems to be really setting up for a part of the schedule to where they can really bank some points away, kind of maybe end up kind of getting that gap that they can use later in the playoffs. I mean, look at Chase Elliott last year. He ended up having to really lean on that regular season performance. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, that win all but solidifies Kyle Busch into a playoff spot unless we get something just completely crazy. But
it's great to see Kyle Busch in victory lane. You could tell it meant a lot to him, Ad, and I think he's going to be able to build off of this, especially getting that taste of victory moving forward. But I got to mention, I'm so used to that 8 car having MGM, 3Chi, a couple of different sponsors on there. The Lucas Oil sponsorship kind of threw me off here. A lot of different paint schemes today. Obviously, out west, it's a different market, so it's going to be mixed up a little bit. But man, that Lucas Oil scheme, it was pretty, it was nice, but I was just not used to seeing that on the 8. It's notable though that a new sponsor comes on with Kyle Busch and automatically wins. Just maybe Joe Gibbs was watching that. Just saying.
Well, and not to mention, Bob, it just to see Kyle Busch in a blue car. I mean, the blue 8 with Kyle Busch behind the wheel is one of those things that, you're kind of used to seeing a few different paint schemes. Obviously, the most notable one, in my opinion, is the AAA scheme that the 22 car does every time they come to this track. I'm going to miss a lot of things about Auto Club, but that scheme may be one of them. It's one of my favorites that they do every year. It just, for whatever reason, man, whenever they have the red, white, and blue on that 22, not only does it rhyme, it makes me just very happy, and it just looks good. I just think it's one of those cleaner schemes that they've got. But Bob, another team that kind of really impressed me today. I mean, just an impressive 3 and 4 finish in this race. I mean, if you would have told me that this that they were going to have this kind of start to the year, I don't know. It just, the way that they've been able to carry the momentum over, Bob, and obviously we'll spoil it now. I'm talking about Trackhouse here. Owner Justin Marks in Florida today at Sebring, racing Trans Ams. So good luck to him. Haven't checked on that result. But Bob, when he gets out of the car, takes his helmet off, gets a drink, he'll be delighted to see that both of his drivers ended up finishing in the top 5 of this race, which is just massively impressive. Things continue for Trackhouse. What do you think of it, Bob?
Yeah, you looked at last year with California with that track, and you saw Daniel Suarez have some speed early on. Ross Chastain was kind of in the mix, and you thought, wow, that's really interesting to see Trackhouse kind of early on have some speed. Maybe they can kind of continue that, and that was really kind of their coming out party to show that they were a force in the garage. They were a consistent speed team as far as they're always going to be around that top 10, top 15 with both of their cars. That's really hard to have consistency in both of your cars in your entire team, let alone. So you saw that last year and thought, okay, you're back this year. Everything's kind of questioning, can Trackhouse, do it again this year? That was the biggest question. They got both cars in the playoffs. They got both cars in the round of 12, and they even got a car in the round of 4. Ross Chastain was, the viral moment last year. Trackhouse, we mentioned them so much on the podcast. It's kind of the poster child for the new wave of ownership. You thought, well, can they do it again this year? And well done to them. I mean, if you had a question that they were going to be even somewhat fast this year, I think you can go ahead and kind of ease your concerns, because 3 and 4, and it wasn't like they had to just sit at the top. Daniel Suarez had multiple penalties. I think he had the speeding penalty on pit roads in stage 2. You thought, oh well, there goes his day. Hate to see that. No, cruised right back up in the front. Ross Chastain had probably the fastest car through the first 2 stages. He won both stages. I mean, what were your thoughts today? No reason to worry if you're a Trackhouse fan, huh?
Yeah, no, not at all. Massively impressed by Ross Chastain. One of the things that really kind of not surprised me, but was just noticeable to me was that car that Ross Chastain was driving was just taking off. I mean, he won that second stage. I think it was by over 4 seconds. I mean, he seemed to just have an absolute rocket ship today. And, in turn, it just seemed as if he kept his nose clean today, Bob. There wasn't a lot of, usually when you see Ross Chastain, especially in the lead of a race, it's because he did something to someone, or bumper, kind of doored somebody or something weird. And, it kind of makes you kind of almost sit there and not feel bad about it, but you're kind of just like, oh man, like,
hand up. I thought when him and Denny were lined up together, I thought it was going to go bad, Ad. I really did.
And that's exactly, you kind of cut me off at the pass there, Bob. And that's exactly what I was just going to say. He even lined up with Denny and there was no issue today. So it's just one of these things. To think of how clean it was for Trackhouse, I think obviously that's the step that I think they needed to take as a team, because whether, Daniel Suarez kind of benefited a little bit from Ross Chastain's don't give a fuck tour, as we'll call it, last year, because I mean, he was involved in a lot of riffraff that kind of got overshadowed by a lot of what was happening with Ross Chastain. So it just seems as if they can keep things clean like they did today, they seem as if they've made the necessary adjustments as a team, and they're fast enough. So it'll be interesting to see how competitive they can be, Bob.
Definitely. I'm glad to see it, though. You saw a lot of parity. I think at one point in the last stage there was, I think, 10 different teams in the top 15. That's what NASCAR needs in the next gen. You're wanting to see parity. You're not wanting to see just the top 2 or 3 teams come in and win every single week and dominate the top 10. You want to see different faces in there, and I think last year with 17 different winners in the regular season, I think 19 overall, you thought, okay, can they sustain that? I think you saw today multiple different cars running in the top 5 where you thought, oh wow, it's interesting to see that. I mean, add one team that jumps out real quick is RFK. Haven't had the strongest oval package in the last few years, especially with Brad Keselowski taking over last year. They've kind of been stepping towards little moments of success. Obviously they had the big win at Bristol last year with Chris Buescher. They had both dual wins at the beginning. They're always good at plate tracks, but the ovals are what really have been their Achilles heel. And they had P7, P13. Brad was running top 5 there for a little bit. Add RFK a sneaky little day over there, it seemed like, huh?
100%, Bob. It's one of those things. Obviously, when you think Fords at Auto Club, the Penske's come to mind because the AAA Auto Club Speedway is the brainchild of Roger Penske. But RFK really did steal the show today. I think obviously the only bit of trouble that they got in was, Brad got spun by Corey LaJoie, who otherwise had a very good race. We can talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, found a way to recover from it. What was really interesting was he slid a whole long way across that asphalt, and luckily he just was able to not go a tire down or anything, which, was really lucky for Brad because he was able to get to the pits on his own power and seemed to just recover nicely from it. And just kind of to get that 7-13 finish, considering where they were at last year, Bob, especially at this time, they just did not have anything going. There was no momentum. And it wasn't until a little bit later that, good old Christopher Buescher kind of came in and saved the season for him. But it just seems as if they've gotten things a little bit more figured out and tuned in this second year. It doesn't seem as if there's as much culture kind of being laid down by Brad Keselowski. And it just seems as if they've kind of translated it to now they're just worried about what's going on the track. And they're certainly doing a great job because both of them today, Bob. I mean, I touched on Keselowski, but I mean, if you want to touch on Christopher Busch or that guy, I mean, just a very impressive day for him.
Yeah, when you think of Auto Club, it's definitely not one of Christopher Busch's. I love calling him Christopher. It's just it
It's
makes me
just too
smile.
much
It's just an
fun.
ode to Dale Jr. It's nice. But you look at Auto Club; it's not one of his best tracks historically, and so for him to come in and run top 10, top 13, top 15 most of the day, that's a big win for that team to build on moving forward. When this is the kind of track you're not necessarily the 2 mile configuration, but that oval configuration is the bread and butter of NASCAR, and you see the teams like Hendrick and Joe Gibbs and Penske. Those are the teams that win on these tracks, and those are the teams that are historically the ones that dominate. And if you're not good on ovals, you're not going to be good at NASCAR. That's a simple fact there, Ad. And RFK being the top Ford team today is what really shocked me because we won't get too deep into it. But Penske, had some speed today with Logano, with Blaney. Blaney got took out. Logano faded at the end. Uh, SHR Harvick was there a little bit, but other than that, the SHR cars were pretty much non-existent today. I mean, RFK was the class of the Fords, and that's very surprising at an oval track like this.
Yeah, just especially considering all the issues they had last year, Bob. But I'll say this: it's just good to see them take the step. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of kind of questions as far as Ford moving forward. Obviously, the two kind of flagships for a long time with Penske and SHR, but kind of be interesting to see how RFK, as they continue to grow, kind of cuts out their slice of the pie that is the manufacturer support from Ford. Because right now, obviously, nowhere near the top, but that could change. I mean, especially if they keep performing like that, Bob. But I will say the one thing that was kind of surprising today, Bob, because there was a manufacturer who we haven't really touched on yet. Obviously, we've touched on the Ford, so we may as well transition to the Chevys, other than obviously Kyle Busch winning the race. Bob, it seemed as if they had a good amount of speed today, and the one person who finally, and I do mean finally, had a good day because he had a long playoff, a long offseason to think about everything, go into the simulator, and Chase Elliott finally put it all together and finished his second today. Top finisher for Hendrick. Hasn't happened in a very long time for old Chase. It's got to feel good, Bob. I mean, let's face facts. It's got to feel good for him.
It's got to be a nice feeling just to have a good run for the 9 team. Like we mentioned in the regular season kind of preview. They faded in the playoffs. They did not have a great end of the last year when they were the team to beat going in. They, kind of used all their regular season points to get where they needed to in the Final Four. It's kind of what it's there for, but they used every cushion they could. You looked at the Chevys, obviously we mentioned it, 1, 2, 3, 4. They were the class of the field today. I think that was obvious. They had the speed. But Hendrick, this is usually a track where they are fairly the class of the field. They've won the last 2 races with Bowman and Larson, and there was no reason to think that they weren't going to be a dominant team again today. Obviously, 2nd and 8th, you have Elliott. You had Bowman pretty much in the top 10 most of the day. He had a very decent car. I don't think he was ever, a threat to win outside of the first 20 laps, but, he had a good car. Outside of his teammates, William Byron, late, had a decent car, was probably top 15 at worst, shouldn't have been anything lower than that. Couple penalties at the end there just really derailed his day, had him finish 25th. And then, the real story early on was Kyle Larson had, not even 20 laps in, has an electrical issue, goes down, I think, 15, 16 laps, however many it was. P29, I mean, they did manufacture at least a little bit of, success out of a bad day. You look at the difference between Byron and Larson was 4 positions. Didn't feel like it today, did it?
No, not at all. 2 completely different ways to just kind of get on the track and earn points today from the Hendricks cars. Especially there with Larson and Byron, just couldn't really put it together today. Alex Bowman, I thought he actually was running very well. Was actually showing a lot of talent, a lot of skill early in the race, but then obviously just kind of fell off there. But just a shame to see Kyle Larson's car, with the electrical failure there, Bob, because they were kind of putting it together. He didn't seem to have a ton of speed at the beginning of the race, but this is a track that you just love to watch Kyle Larson race on because there's just when you've got 5 racing lines like this and you know drivers are going to have to move around and there's so many accomplished dirt track racers and stuff that are currently in the Cup Series, it just makes out to be a very good day of racing. And to see Kyle Larson kind of get taken out of that early when he seemed like he was kind of destined to be a part of it was a bit of a bummer. But I mean, the racing overall, Bob. I mean, we talked Chevy a little bit there with the Hendricks, so we may as well move on to the third because the Toyotas, Bob. I mean, the one that kind of jumps to my mind, other than Chris Bell, which we'll get in a little bit, is Bubba Wallace had a pretty solid day. Obviously, the engine blows up, which you hate to see, but I mean, that was really kind of we mentioned it in the pre-show. That was kind of the only Toyota I really noticed all day, Bob.
Yeah, Denny Hamlin was up there. He was, top 10 all day, but it was a quiet top 10. He's 0 for 20, and I think now 0 for 21 at Fontana, so he is probably not too upset about that track going away. He's probably waiting for that short track to be built any second now. He might even be in the infield waiting to start bulldozing once this Xfinity race goes checkered out. He might be taking down the safer barriers himself, but the Toyotas, I will say, it was better than last year. I'm not sure if you recall, but the Toyotas started overheating because of the desert sand getting into the radiators last year. So, we did at least step up from there. That's, a positive. But, I mean, other than your block-off plates getting clogged, it wasn't a banner day for you. I mean, obviously Denny finished 6th. Bubba was probably your best car outside of that because, he was, top 12, top 15 all day. Again, not necessarily a historically great track for him, but you're starting to see him get confident more on these ovals, and that's really what you want to see for him in a long-term season preview. But, I mean, other than that, Truex was 2 laps down at one point. He lost a wheel in the middle of, going off the pit road. Well, I guess we can get into it now. Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, they DNF'd out of the wreck at the restart. I mean, it was a calamity there, but it was a
the great
banner day for Toyota, man. Just
the great lap 87 accordion, Bob. I mean, it was just one of those wrecks. I mean, I thought we were going to see Eric Almirola flip there for a second. I mean, it just seemed as if it was one of those things. Poor Tyler Reddick at this track, man. If you don't have any luck, if it weren't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all. Just can't seem to avoid it. But Bob, it was so odd watching that lap 87 wreck because it just, you could never really get a feel for how it started. And it took even the announcers like a couple watch throughs to be like, all right, where did this start? It was pretty weird, man. A weird wreck.
They started blaming Gragson on the radio at first on the broadcast, and then it came out that it all started at the very front of the control. I mean, it was literally just, it felt kind of like a video game wreck where the computer stacks up and the whole field stacks up, and usually you just go under everyone in the kind of the low side. But you saw the in-car camera for Chris Bell. It was a nasty little hit a couple of times. It was jarring his head around. You could tell it did not feel good, and that's always the worry with this next-gen cars. These little hits, not the giant violent hits where the car goes flying into the wall at 200 miles an hour, but those 70-mile-an-hour hits or those 150-mile-an-hour hits where you get hit in the back or you get hit in the front. It's a jarring hit, and those are the kind of accidents that they don't look bad on TV, but I'm sure Christopher Bell felt that when, like you said, Eric Almirola almost went flying into him. It was just a calamity of a wreck there in all accounts.
Yeah, it was very odd because, you just saw those cars start stacking up and there was just nowhere for them to go. And then eventually, all that pressure just kind of gets released with Almirola's car just popping up like that. It was kind of remarkable to watch because you really were. It just did not seem as if there was going to be anywhere for all of that to go. And it just, the way it stacked up, Bob, it just stacked up so quick. There was just nothing anybody could really do. I don't know. It brings the question to where it's like, is having more control. I know they've changed the restart, the green restart zone. Hopefully we don't see more wrecks like this with guys trying to control the restart. But I don't know, man. It was calamity for sure. I think that's the only word I've got for it.
It just felt kind of like it was a calamity all around this weekend, to be honest with you, Ad. I mean, don't want to, wrap up the thoughts too quick here on you, but I mean, overall, Fontana, it was, supposed to be a big celebration. It's the last race there this weekend. You're selling it off. You're going to make it into a short track, and then you get the snow on Saturday. We can get into that here in a second, but you get the whole schedule thrown off here. There's no cars on track at all on Saturday, no qualifying, nothing. So you get everyone packed in on Sunday. It's cold. It's hard to get to. Apparently, there's ice and snow on the way there every direction but the track. I mean, strange way to end the tenure at Fontana. Just very sad.
Yeah, Bob, this was kind of the place where I really got into NASCAR. My grandpa used to take me. They did all sorts of events over in Fontana, like racing wise. There was, a car show every year that they did, and then obviously, the race at Auto Club, and you go and it's one of these things that, especially as far as racing in Southern California, there's always been a track. Whether it was, for the older generation, there was Riverside. There was that track in Gardena, Ascot Speedway, that was a dirt track in Gardena that, you could ask some of the older guys and some of the old racing fans from Southern California. That was a legendary venue. But, as Southern California, it's one of these places where the real estate market is what it is. And, if you own that much property, if you own 400 acres in a developed urban sprawl, I get it. I understand why they're doing it. But watching this race today, Bob, you have a 2-mile oval that has 5 lanes of racing, asphalt that wears tires out. So guys have to think about saving tires, and it just produces fun racing. It's one of those tracks that I think its legacy will always be that 5 wide, kind of freewheeling. Everyone's always moving around to try and find some air, find some clean air, find some grip. It always seemed like there was action. And every driver who they interviewed before the race today just had nothing but positive things to say about it. And like I said, I get it. I understand the real estate market is what it is. Glad they're keeping the 90 acres and excited to see what they're going to do with the short track. But I don't know, Bob. I'll tell you this much. I am going to miss this 2-mile oval because it has produced some awesome racing over the years.
Absolutely. There was definitely a period where there was some snoozers in the 2000s. So we won't sugarcoat it, but especially with the next gen car, the last 2 races have been so damn good. But yes, the last decade, the last 15 years or so, there's been some iconic finishes. Obviously, they played on the broadcast the 2013, the Joey Logano Tony Stewart fight with, you had Hamlin and Kyle Busch and all of them. The next year, I believe 2014, you had the same 3, Hamlin, Logano, and Busch, where Busch kind of steals it on the outside. There's been some iconic moments at this track for sure, Ad. And you also see, it's a worn down pavement, so it's really bumpy. There's a lot of different surfaces that, you can go high side. If you've got grip with new tires, you can go low. You don't get that with some of the ovals that are kind of cookie cutter, as you will. This track has character. It's got something different about it. It's definitely one of the better tracks in NASCAR. And NASCAR, I said earlier, is focused around oval track racing. Obviously, short track is the name of the game, but ovals are what this calendar is based around. At the end of the day, it's the majority of the tracks, and you've got one of the better ones that we're taking away. It's unfortunate. I understand that we're going to the short track race, and it's going to be exciting. But man, it's tough to see an iconic venue like this that maybe we didn't consider iconic until we lose it, and then we realize, oh man, we're losing something good here.
I think it's one of those things, Bob. You only really go once a year. It's part of the West Coast swing. And it's just has always been such an appropriate way to begin the NASCAR season because, the Clash is what it is. Daytona is Daytona. It's restrictor plate, it's Speedway. This feels like NASCAR's season begins because it's the first oval race of the year. And not only is it the first one, I think it's one of the better ones that they do every year. And a big part of that is just the track. I think, usually you get good weather, obviously. Kind of weird to get the snow and stuff like that and show people in the national audience that, yes, we do get snow in California every now and again. We do get bad weather. It's just once every 20 years or so, which seems ridiculous, but we're sorry for who we are as people. No, we're not. But I just, Bob, the thing is Fontana, it's always had such a character, and it just has always seemed like it really does kind of start the season off on the right foot. Going from the 2 mile to the 1 mile, and then the mile or the mile and a half into the mile. It just seemed like we got everything that NASCAR had to offer in the first 4 weeks, and taking Fontana out of it, you know, honestly, Bob, I was talking about this with my uncle today while I was watching the race. I mean, what are we going to do next year? I mean, do they send him to Portland in the West Coast swing? Do they? I mean, what does this look like? I mean, in a perfect world, they go to Irwindale because that's one of the better short tracks, but it's definitely not a facility that's ready for NASCAR. So, what do we do here? It just leaves more questions than answers.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where they go because Irwindale's reportedly also been sold, but they're still racing there. So there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. Obviously, everyone wanted short tracks in NASCAR. That was the biggest thing. Everyone wants to go back to the short track routes in NASCAR. I totally understand that. You want to take away places like Texas and more ovals like that, maybe even a Dover. I understand that, but you lose a place like Fontana that's got character. It stinks. I hate it, but you're getting the short track racing that fans clamored for, and then as soon as you get that, the next gen car comes along and the racing's amazing at Fontana. You're never going to be able to make everyone happy at the end of the day, and this is just unfortunately a reality of the economy, the shape of the sport, and the region. It's kind of a perfect storm there.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, obviously, when this was developed in the '90s, I mean, Fontana was certainly not what it is now. Even where Fontana has gone economically in the past, 20, 30 years, it's a completely different area. The real estate market is completely different. And, I guess at the end of the day, what we've really got to hang our hat on here is, NASCAR just sold roughly 350 acres in California for a price well over $2 billion. So it's really good to see that cash flow is coming into the sport. I hope that this means that they may be able to give the teams a little bit more of a fair share of the revenue deal. I mean, at that point, you've sold off just a ridiculous amount of property. Be very anxious to see what they do to reinvest it back into the sport. But Bob, I mean, I'm gonna miss this track. I mean, it's the one I'm the most attached to, obviously, because it's the one other than the Coliseum where I've been to a race and it's really been memorable. So I'm gonna miss this one, Bob. I'm definitely gonna miss Fontana.
Definitely, and with the Xfinity race going checkered, John Hunter Nemechek, your winner at the nightcap on the Xfinity race here. That race was just as good. The racing at this track is just producing solid racing, whether it's Xfinity, whether it's Cup. Obviously, the Xfinity racing every week is in and out, just fantastic. But do have to mention one notable moment from the Xfinity race we'll touch on from this podcast. That Sheldon Creed save when he's spinning out, coming out of 4. Barely tags the back wall, ended up coming back for a competitive run. I think he finished, I have to double check, it was in the top 15 for sure. He was leading in the third stage at one point. That was a moment where my underpants would have changed colors. I would have needed a oxygen mask. I wouldn't have been able to drive for a week. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But what a save from the 2 car.
In the words of Patrick Starr, these were white when I bought them. I mean, his underwear at this point, Bob, there is no way they are clean, because I thought he was going back first into the wall, but just a hell of a save. It's one of those things. Anytime it's almost more impressive watching a guy spin and then save it than it is to watch somebody consistently run at the speeds that these guys do and just do it cleanly. So it just reminds you that every now and again that just how much talent these guys have to be able to save cars going that fast. I mean, just massively impressive.
Just impressive on all accounts. I don't know how they do it. The pose, the composure, everything about it. The poise, the composure, everything about it's just impressive there. But I mean, great weekend. I think if Fontana wanted to go out with a bang, wanted people to remember them and yearn for their return, they got what they wanted. The NASCAR fans are asking, why can't we come back next year? And I'm going to miss this track. But any other thoughts that we missed besides just singing the praises of this track over and over at Fontucky?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, man. It's just the last send off, the final countdown for old Fontucky. It, I now officially have no reason to ever go out there, and that just about wraps it up for me. I don't
Well,
think.
I mean, I may fly into Ontario one day just to visit you. It may be a cheap
But
flight
even then,
offering, and I'm gonna.
but even Ontario, Bob, it's closer to me than Fontucky. There's no need for me to go all the way out there unless I'm like going out to
Oh,
past Vegas,
I
past on the
just
way to
assumed they
Vegas.
were literally in the same area.
They're kind of like border in the same. Like, yes, you would fly to Ontario to get to Fontucky, but oh no, you've got a little bit of a ways from Ontario to out to
Interesting.
Fontana. Yeah, it goes to show you how messed up my mind is because as you can see, when they zoomed out of a racetrack, that area is not rural. I mean, it used to be, but in my mind, there is no changing it. Fontana will forever be a rural area. It will have nothing around it. We will call it Fontucky, and that will be that. But I will say it was kind of odd to like zoom out and like obviously beautiful shots of the mountains, which you get those anytime it snows in California and it's clear. It's just yeah, TV producers for whatever reason just love that type of thing. So once again, wonderful job, Fox. Thanks for showing me all the shots of the mountains. But
I was gonna say, shout out to the producers for those shots multiple times. I know the overhead from the blimp was cool, getting to see the track and all the runs off the restart, but the shot in the background with the mountains there, I'm a sucker for that imagery on TV. So look, I know it was overplayed probably a few different times on Fox, but I don't care because, like they kept saying, it was unprecedented how low that snow was, and it's just a gorgeous backdrop.
one of
Absolutely
those,
beautiful.
yeah. If I told you that there's usually not that much snow on those mountains, you probably wouldn't believe me. But it looked like they were there, and it was kind of like the artist paintbrush for the end for Fontana's farewell here. So, Bob, um, I think that just about wraps it up. I mean, do you got anything
Yeah.
left?
No, I mean we are two races down, 34 to go. 30, 35, I guess, if you count the All Star race here. And we're going to do a damn podcast for it, so I guess 35 to go. Um, Long season, but the West Coast swing is officially underway, and uh, every racer is going to be tweeting a picture of In and Out. Every NASCAR media member is probably already taking a picture of it. Um, a long season ahead, but we're going to be bringing it every single week here at Breaking Balls for y'all.
Well, that being said, as a new member of the NASCAR media, it turns out that I will need to drive down the street and get myself some In-N-Out, Bob. So, that being said, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share this with anybody who you think may be interested. And I will not be sharing my double double with you. So, you guys have a great time.